What is up guys, it's Topsy, and here we are once again trying to fix every single deck from every single SpeedDuel box. So far in the series, we've covered every single last one of the SpeedDuel sets, with the exception of the very first and the very last. And in today's video, we're going to be tackling the newest SpeedDuel set, that of course being Battle City Finals. And the interesting thing about Battle City Finals is that for the most part, most of the decks don't need any help. If anything, they need nerfs in order to make them more balanced with everything else in the format. So we'll address that once we get there. But before we can get into going ahead and covering all the changes that I had made to each of the character decks, I do want to go ahead and preface how exactly I'm going about and making these changes. First things first, one of the most important things is that we're not changing the strategy overall. What we're doing instead is adding cards and or removing cards in order to make the strategy more viable. Also, by that extent, we're going to be working with the original skills this deck came with, and we're not going to be adding in any custom skills or any other skills from older sets. Finally, for the most part, I want to try and stay within the SpeedDuel card pool, but that doesn't mean that I won't dip my toe into other cards that exist out of SpeedDuels. So with all that being said, if you do end up enjoying today's video and would like to support me, then leaving a like and subscribing to the channel is the best way of doing so. Also, this isn't the very first video. I've already done a ton of different videos for every single other SpeedDuel set. So if you're interested in those, there's going to be a link to the playlist in the description below. Alright, with all that being said, let's dive right in. Alright then, so starting off today's video, we are going to be covering Yugi with his Face Knight / Slifer strategy. And honestly, for the most part, this deck needs no changes. This deck is built incredibly broken, but nevertheless, there is a few things that I would like to change. Before we go ahead and cover the changes that I would make, the quick synopsis as to what the deck is trying to do. Essentially, you want to open something like Bauer's Knight or the Joker's Knight in order to assemble a field of Jack, Queen, and King's Knight in order to special summon something like Arcana Triumph Joker and or normal summon Slifer the Sky Dragon. In addition, you have cards like Thunder Speed Summon that allows you to search out one of these two cards if you have assembled all these three cards on the field. You have cards like Courts of Cards that allows you to special summon these guys from your graveyard. And you have cards like Joker's Wild that's able to search out something like Thunder Speed Summon. And for the most part, the deck is really good at what it's supposed to be doing. It just has a ton of really powerful staples, and the skill Sky God Revelation makes this even better, just because if you're able to establish one of these two guys, by normal summon, keep in mind, you get to draw until you have 6 cards in your hand, and that's absolutely broken. Now, as to what exactly I would change regarding this strategy. One of the cards that I didn't particularly like in this deck was Dark Magician Girl, and the main reason why is because it just felt so shoehorned into this strategy. And I feel like Konami, every single time they get a chance to print Dark Magician Girl, they kind of just take it. So instead of Dark Magician Girl, what I would like to see instead is the addition of Magician's Valkyria. This is a card that resembles Dark Magician Girl. It gives you a normal summon in the deck, and it was a card that was included in the miscellaneous set, so I feel like it fits really, really well. Additionally, another reason I don't like Dark Magician Girl specifically in this deck is the strategy already has so many high level monsters, which can cause you to break at times. Granted, that probably balances the deck a little bit, but nevertheless, it just felt so awkward when you had a perfect replacement in the miscellaneous cards already. Lastly, one other change that I kind of would like to see would have been having the deck go away from the idea of having Arcana Triumph Joker be the pseudo boss monster of the deck. The card's cool, but it's incredibly powerful, especially when you pair it up with some of the most broken cards in this strategy. And what I think would have been a lot cooler was if we went ahead and removed Arcana Triumph Joker, added in Face Card Fusion in order to add in Arcana Knight Joker into this deck. I feel like Arcana Knight Joker would have been a perfect other pseudo boss monster for this deck for a few reasons. One, it's a card that already existed in SpeedDuels. It would have been a perfect time to reprint this card. And finally, it feels like this card doesn't overall overshadow Slifer as a boss monster. But give me your thoughts. The big change realistically would have just been removing Dark Magician Girl, but I feel like if you wanted to do a little bit more, Arcana Triumph Joker would be another great replacement. Also, if that's not enough, another way to balance out the strategy more would be removing something like Monster Reborn, Sorcerer of Revealing Light, and or Quaking Mirror Force. Just removing one of these three powerful staples and replacing it with something that's somewhat similar is more than enough to fix his strategies. Alright, with that being said, we fixed Yugi, on to the next. Alright then, so right after Yugi, we have Kaiba with whatever the hell Konami made right here. This deck is horrendous. It is the weakest strategy to come out of Battle City Finals, and honestly, that's not even the thing that upsets me the most. The thing that upsets me the most about Kaiba's deck is the fact that This looks like it came out of the original Battle CD box, only with minor upgrades to some of the power staples the deck has access to. The deck has no cohesion whatsoever, and it doesn't do anything well, not even with the skills. And that's really upsetting. Now, I feel like it's almost pointless talking about the skills this deck has, because neither one goes ahead and fixes anything regarding this deck. And genuinely, like, you're better off just playing with one of the miscellaneous skills as opposed to any of these two. But for the sake of this set, in this series, we're going to be working off Executive Privilege. Now then, with all that being said, what exactly am I going to do with Kaiba? Well, because I did say that I'm going to be working off Executive Privilege, I'm going to be going ahead and focusing in on specifically Blue Eyes. That means that we're going to be cutting out all the Union XZ combination stuff. So, bye-bye with Whitehead Dragon, X-Head Cannon, and Z-Metal Tank. In addition, we're also going to be getting rid of Union Hanger, and of course, Union Scramble, because we're not having any of those cards available to us. And of course, all the fusion monsters in this extra deck. Alright then, so we have a lot of slots opened up, 5 to be exact. Now, what exactly are we going to be adding in the stead of those cards? Well, first things first, we have to replace some of the monsters. And one of the first cards that I thought about adding into this deck was none other than Witch of the Black Forest, for the very reason that it's going to help us search out a card like King of D a lot easier. This card is extremely important for the strategy, especially because we want to go ahead and establish our Blue Eyes White Dragon. But in addition to the King of Dragons, we're also going to be adding in some powerful dragon monsters. There are two different options you can go with here, those being Spear Dragon and or Vanguard of the Dragon. And the main reason I'm going to be going with Vanguard of the Dragon in this set specifically is for two very important reasons. One, it allows you to set up the graveyard, which is super important, especially with something like Revival Dragon Rhapsody being in this deck. But for two, if your opponent decides to out this card with card effects, then the cool thing about this card is that it allows you to special summon a normal dragon monster, hence Blue Eyes, from your graveyard, which is really cool. So this seems to synergize really well in this set. In addition, I would also like some other flex spots in this strategy with something like Exploder Dragon, which allows you to out any annoying monster our opponent may have without risking our life points. So I feel like that's super important. And with that, we've replaced all our Union pieces. Now for the Union Hanger and the Union Scramble. For Union Scramble, I'm going to be giving the deck Dragon's Rebirth in order to go ahead and allow this strategy to go ahead and summon out whatever dragon you need. Being able to replace any of your weaker dragon monsters for a bigger dragon seems really cool, and it fits really well in this strategy. But in addition, we're going to give the deck access to some form of back removal because we don't have it. And since we're going to be focusing on dragons so much, we're going to give the deck Stamping Destruction. Alright then, so with this, the deck is starting to look a lot better, it's starting to get some direction, but there's still a few more changes that I would like to make. In addition to the removal of the XYZ pieces, we're going to be also removing both Ancient Lamp and Legend. I think these are cute, but honestly they're not that good, and we can do without them. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of these two cards. And we're going to be adding in a lot more dragons. With that, we're going to be considering a lot of different options. We have cards like Tyrant Dragon or Primaterial Dragon, which are two really cool dragon monsters we can add. Go ahead and benefit us the effect of something like Revival Dragon Rhapsody and or Flute of So Many Dragons. But the big thing about these two cards is that they're high level monsters, so it could feel a bit awkward having them in your opening hand, which could break you pretty bad. But if you don't like the idea of these two cards, of course we can always go back with Spear Dragon and or Twin-Headed Behemoth. Or another really interesting option is going ahead and adding Lord of Dragons in addition to this deck as well, just because it gives you another option in addition to the King of Dragons as another target to activate something like Revival Dragon Rhapsody and or Flute of So Many Dragon a lot more effectively. Of course, this is going to be all up to preference to you, the player, and your play style. For me specifically, I think I'm going to value a lot of more attack potency with Spear Dragon and the flexibility of something like Primaterial Dragon in this deck. Alright then, so this is starting to look really good. Now, there's still a bit more that I want to change regarding this strategy. And one of the important things that I want to change is the removal of Trade-In. I know it sounds crazy removing a card that's this good, but I had a lot of times when I was practicing with this strategy that I would either open Trade-In with no Blue Eyes or Blue Eyes with no Trade-In, and it just felt horrendous. So instead of Trade-In, we're going to give the deck Melody. This way that you can actively search out the Blue Eyes White Dragons, which is going to make something like Executive Privilege work out a lot more often. And I feel like that's super important. And with that, I feel like we've pretty much fixed up Kaiba's deck. This version of the strategy should work a lot more effectively, it should be a lot more cohesive, and try to facilitate the deck a lot better. Of course, there's a lot of different things you could do, but I'm pretty happy with what we got here. Give me your thoughts in the comment section below. Alright then, so now that we're done with Kaiba and that nightmare that we had to fix, we're on to Joey, another great deck to come out of Battle City Finals. Honestly, this deck needs very little help and it's super easy to pilot. The deck essentially is summon a big warrior monster, get them boosted up with Battle City Slugger, and just start beating down, and whenever you can, search out your Gift of Lightning to go for game. Super simple. Now, what exactly would I change for this deck? Well, there's only one card that I would change, and that is the removal of Invader of the Throne. Card's neat. I get that it's supposed to work with Sol and Luna, but honestly, it seems it's not that good of a card, and it's just kind of like a whatever thing. So we're going to be removing her. Instead of Invader of Throne, I feel like we can go ahead and add something like Goblin Attack Force, which is a canonical Joey card, and or Sasuke Samurai, which allows it to deal with pesky flip monsters and or just set monster your opponent may have. It's really up to you as to what exactly you would like to add in instead of Invader of the Throne, but I feel like both of these cards do a really good job of going ahead and aiding the strategy. I think that for me, I like the idea of the deck just being like Unga Bunga Beatdown, just no thought behind attacking with Goblin Attack Force. And it synergizes really well with Battle City Slugger. But there's one more card that you could potentially add in, and that being Adhesion Trap Hole, which also fits really well with this set, just because this goes ahead and cuts the attack of whatever monster is normal summoned by your opponent. And also we have a theming of trap holes in this set, in this deck already, so it would fit really well. But this is completely up to you. And with that, we fixed up Joey. We've only really needed to make minimal changes, and the deck works really well. Alright then, next up we have Marik, and Marik's deck is really cool. Essentially we have a Winged Dragon of Ra strategy. Originally thought the skill was worse than it actually was. It's a lot better. You're able to mulligan any of these pieces and or search any of these pieces at any point during the duel. And on top of that, it's the monsters don't really have any real synergy. We kind of just have like Marik classics and a bunch of very powerful staples. So yeah, the deck, nothing crazy here. Now then, what exactly would I do in order to fix Marik? Well, one thing that I thought about to myself is that I wasn't that big of a fan of the water stuff. I think it's cool that Konami ended up introducing these cards into speed duels, but they don't work that well. As an example, Lord Poison can only special summon Lakunga from the graveyard, and at that you need Lakunga in the grave. Renadora is okay, it's a standalone big monster, but Revival Jam, this card's just ass. This card's horrible. Lastly, Lakunga, it's your targets are these three cards in order to special summon a shitty token. So we're not going to be entertaining them. So we're going to be removing all four of these monsters. In addition, we're also going to be removing Remove Trap. This card's horrendous, so we can do better. And with that, we have 4 slots open to go ahead and try and fix Marik. To go ahead and fill the void of the monsters we replaced, we're going to be adding in one super important monster, that being Mystic Tomato. This card is going to be crucial in order to go ahead and get access to cards like Holding Arms, Dark Geroid, Nudoria, whatever you need, which is going to be really good for the deck. Not only is it going to help you thin out the strategy a bit more, but also it gives you like a cool flexible monster to whatever you need in the deck. Also, Hidden Soldier, I want this card to be live more often than not, so we're going to give the deck a lot of dark monsters, so keep that in mind. Staying in tune with dark monsters, another card that I want to give the deck is Spirit Reaper. One of the things this deck does is you're trying to control your opponent, so typically you want to go ahead and keep your opponent from either attacking you and or using their monsters. Granted, why we have cards like Nightmare Wheel, Lava Golem, Metal Reflect Slime, for the most part we don't want our opponent doing anything. So Spirit Reaper fits really well. It's a dark and it gives off Marik vibes. I don't know if it's just me. Alright then, so moving on, we could go ahead and add one more dark monster if you really wanted to, with something like Giant Orc and or Zombraya, just to go ahead and make the deck feel a lot more full and maybe give you a replacement for that Grenadora. I don't think it's particularly necessary, but if you want to, you can. Since given the fact that these cards kind of do feel weird to have in your hand, but you can mulligan them, so it's not that big of a deal. We'll come back to these, but if you were to add one of these 2 cards, I would suggest Zombraya, just because I like the fact that this card stays face up on the field a lot longer. Granted, it does get weaker and weaker. The only thing is, like, I don't like the Giant Orc goes ahead and nerfs himself by changing himself into defense mode when he attacks, but again, up to you guys. Now, for the last few cards that we're going to be adding into this deck, one of the cards that I would have loved to have seen in this strategy was something like Mask of Accursed. It's a card that already is a Marik card, but also the fact that this card, in addition, works like a Nightmare Wheel, essentially preventing your opponent from attacking you by targeting one monster they control and continually burning them for the damage. In addition to that, I would also like to have seen something like Tribute to the Doom added to this deck as well. We already have access to something like Monster Reborn, so being able to discard any monster, pop a monster your opponent controls, and then revive it with Monster Reborn is very, very powerful. And lastly, this is going to be completely up to you guys. So we have a few options. Again, we can add in one of these two monsters in order to give us a bit more beef in order to deal damage to our opponent. Or we can give ourselves consistency with Allure of Darkness. Now that we have so many more dark monsters, it's going to be live more often. Or if you don't like Malevolent Catastrophe being your only form of background removal, you can give the deck Dark World Lightning. I happen to think that Malevolent Catastrophe is a really cool trap card. However, it kind of does not work that well with this deck, especially when it's working well. So I would suggest something like Dark World Lightning would be something to consider, just so you don't have to solely rely on Malevolent Catastrophe. And with that, I feel like we fixed up Marik's deck. This should work a lot more effectively and be a very, very annoying deck to go up against. But give me your thoughts. Coming in right after Marik, we have Bakura. And Bakura's deck is really, really cool. But the main thing I don't like about Bakura's deck is the fact that the synergy they tried building with the Dark Necrophere with the Destiny board cards, neat in concept, but it didn't work that well in my opinion. It's a bit cloggy, it's a bit awkward, but it's able to kind of accomplish it. The deck overall is really, really neat in the way that it functions, but there's a few things we would change. Now, for the most part, I don't think this deck needs to remove all the Destiny board pieces. And the main reason I say that is it's so tied to the main skill Fear of Darkness that it just feels wrong to remove it. So we're going to stick with it. I know it's crazy, but stick with me. And instead, we're going to be removing some of the Fiend monsters in this strategy that I feel like don't live up to what they're supposed to be doing. Those being Fusion Devourer, Invader of Darkness, and Doomdog Orcros. Orcros is one of the cards that I actually like a lot just because it's able to search out the Invader and or Dark Necrophere, but because we already have Dark Spirit Mastery, I feel like it's redundant to have both these two cards. Now, in their stead, we're going to be adding in some more high impact Fiend monsters that can give us a lot more help. And one of the Fiend monsters that I feel like is a non-negotiable should be Mad Reloader. And the main reason I say this is because not only does this card allow you to draw into your important pieces of the strategy, but it also allows you to set up the graveyard in order to have your Dark Necrophere be live a lot more often. And I feel like that's really, really important. After the Mad Reloader, another card that I feel like should be added into this deck would be something like Dark Mimic level 3, just to again give you a lot more consistency and be another Fiend monster you can just set. Finally, the last card that I would add in is another Fiend monster with something like Wall of Illusion in order to give you a nice defensive monster that can get rid of an opponent's monster, and or Mist Archfiend if you really, really need another big Fiend monster. This is really up to your play style, but I feel like Mist Archfiend works really cool in this deck. And with that, I feel like we fixed up Bakura's deck. Realistically, if you really wanted to, you could go ahead and remove all the Destiny board pieces and then just work with Malevolence of the Millennium Ring. It's a great skill, but I kind of feel like it takes something away from the original strategy. But again, it's completely up to you guys. This version of the deck I feel like works a lot better just because you have a lot less dead Fiend monsters in your opening hand. But give me your thoughts. Alright then, now we're on to one of the characters that had the most broken deck to come out of this set, that of course being Ishizu. And genuinely guys, you don't have to touch this deck. This deck works really, really well already, and you have to make no changes in order to like make it playable. But if you wanted to nerf the deck, there's something I would recommend, and that is the removal of Mudora the Sword Oracle. This card is a play starter like no other, and it is really, really unfair. Now, if you wanted to replace Mudora, what I would suggest you go ahead and give the deck is something like Stele in order to give you a lot more plays with your Gravekeeper monsters, maybe Spear as another monster that goes in and benefits of Necro Valley. But if you're completely insane and want to make this deck even more broken, don't do that. So if realistically, if you wanted to make this deck better, you could add Mirage of Nightmare, give it either MST and or Double Cyclone, and then with that, the deck is disgustingly good. But I don't suggest this would make anyone upset to go up against, and realistically either leave this deck alone the way that it is or replace Mudora with something like Spear or Stele in order to balance out the format a little bit. But those are my suggestions. Alright then, so we're now on to Odion, and Odion is a really interesting case for me because I think that he has two really cool strategies tied up that don't work all that well together. Now, essentially with Odion, we have both a Pac-Man strategy and a Trap Monster strategy, which shouldn't go ahead and clash that much with each other. But the main issue is that we also have something like Circuit in this deck as well, that is a non-searchable monster in the deck, which sucks already. Now, what exactly would I do in order to fix up Odion's strategy? Well, first things first. I think we need to remove something like Double Snare. This Double Snare is horrendous and I hated seeing this card every single time I saw it. So we're going to get rid of this. And instead of this, we're going to be giving the deck something like Zero Gravity. Which, because one of the big issues that I found myself when playing this deck is that whenever I would have no way of dealing with an opponent's monster, my Pac-Man cards were very susceptible to being destroyed. And one of the important things is that in this deck, you want to keep your Pac-Man monsters alive in order to go ahead and use their effects a lot more cohesively. In that note, I don't really like Judgment of Anubis. It works okay in this deck, but it's just such a situational card. And for me, I don't like those type of cards. So we're going to be removing it. And instead of that, I would prefer to give the deck something in order to make the deck work a lot better. Something like Double Cyclone in order to go ahead and have the Mirage Nightmare function a lot better in the deck. I've already said that I'm not a big fan of Mirage Nightmare, so personally for me, I would cut this card. But if you wanted to go ahead and play with Mirage, I would suggest adding in Double Cyclone as another option to go ahead and out it on your own turn. But I think the most important card to add into the strategy would be something like Temple of the Kings. And the main reason I say this is that working with the mystical beast of Circuit is really, really frustrating. And it forces you to play with the Royal Temple of Kings skill card, which is only okay. And essentially, if you wanted to, you could play the better skill in Desert Peril, which allows you to facilitate the Pac-Man cards a lot better. Give the deck something like Temple of the Kings. That way you're able to synergize the two decks a lot better. Now, again, I don't love Mirage Nightmares, so personally for me, I would remove this card as well. I know it sounds crazy because it's such a powerful card, but again, I'm not a huge fan of it. And instead, I would go ahead and give the deck something else. And there's a few options. We could give the deck Sol and Luna, because I feel like this uses this card a lot better than Joey. We could give the deck something like Apophis, Swamp of Deity, to replace something like Apophis, the regular one, because this card does nothing. Or give the deck Statue of Anguish Pattern, which would be another boss monster for the strategy. This would be Anguish Pattern and Guardian's Fix as the true boss monsters of this deck. But I feel like with the addition of Sol and Luna, that's more than enough to make the deck a lot more playable. But give me your thoughts. Alright then, and we're now on to the very last deck, that being Mai's Harpy Amazoness strategy. And just like Ishizu, we don't have to touch this deck. This deck is beyond broken, and instead what I'm going to be talking to you guys is about how to nerf this deck. And there is one big nerf you can do, well, two different nerfs you can do, but you only have to do one of them. And that is either replace Amazoness Princess or replace Amazoness Onslaught. I think that these two cards in particular are so oppressive together, especially when you take into consideration that you have Amazoness Call already in this deck. It's ridiculous. So what I would say is that if you wanted to replace Amazoness Onslaught, I would say you could add something like Amazoness Village, Amazoness Willpower, and or Amazoness Heirloom. These three cards are great because they can work with both strategies. But if you wanted to replace Amazoness Princess, then these replacements for that would be something like Birdface in order to help the Harpy strategy better, and or Amazoness Sage in order to give you back removal in this deck. But whatever change you decide to make, it's up to you guys. Again, I would not give this deck anything in order to fix, make it stronger, because this deck is already broken as it is. And instead, I would say give one of these two cards into this deck in order to nerf it a bit more. Alright guys, and with that, we've pretty much fixed up Battle City Finals. Battle City Finals was interesting to go ahead and tackle just because of how powerful a lot of these character decks were. And just how ass Kaiba's deck was also. I did not expect to spend as long talking about it and or making that many changes. And honestly, I am not that excited for the next video that I'm going to be making, that is fixing the original Battle City box, because essentially that set is just what if we had 8 different Kaiba decks. And it's, I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it's essentially that. Those decks have very, very little bit of synergy, so it's going to be weird the way that I go ahead and fix those. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, guys, if you did end up enjoying today's video and would like to support me, then leaving a like and subscribe to the channel would be the best way of doing so, and I appreciate every single one of you guys that does so. Also, if this is the first video you're catching in this series, then consider checking out the entire playlist. Again, I've already fixed up every single set from Duel Academy all the way to like Midterm Destruction, and it's been really fun doing that so far. Or if you're interested in other SpeedDuel content, then consider checking out this video right here. I do all sorts of different types of SpeedDuel content, so you're bound to find something that catches your fancy. But with that, guys, I've been your boy Topsy. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.